I finally saw Tron Ares at an early screening, and I gotta be honest, this is a movie that couldn't even believe it actually got made. I am a huge Tron fan, but we have to be realistic. The Tron movies have not been successes. Disney doesn't really like to take a risk on things, so the fact that this movie got made is crazy to me. And unfortunately, without the director involved, I had heard so much movement for years on a Tron movie that just seemed like they were just never going to happen. And then it finally happened, and here we are. So, what do I make of this movie? What do I make of this movie is really the question with this. Because this is a movie that I liked overall, but I can tell you it was a fucking mess of a movie. This is a movie that does not go farther enough with any of its concepts, and we'll talk about that more in the negatives. But let's start with the positives. The score to this movie is great. It's not as good as Daft Punk's, but Nine Inch Nails does a really good job here. The visuals are still cool as hell. I did watch it in 3D for the early screening, not my choice. I do think that I imagine Tron Legacy was pretty awesome in 3D, but honestly, seeing this movie in 3D, it was not very good. Because most of the movie is very dark, and there wasn't a lot of time in the grid, and also because there's not a lot of like blue Trons, there's a lot of, or blue programs, I should say, but you get mostly red ones. It doesn't make anything really pop out at you, and then they don't throw their disc around and things like that you would think would be cool in 3D, so it's just kind of a, why am I watching this in 3D type deal? But visual is still great, and the action's cool, and also the tie-ins to the other Tron movies is really awesome, especially a really cool one towards the end of the movie, with a certain cameo that I guess is spoiled, but I didn't want to know, so I'm not going to make sure you know if you don't know. But very cool stuff. I really enjoyed all that. This movie. Now let's get into the bad. First of all, the first thing I will say is the script here is atrocious. There are fucking lines of dialogue that are just absolutely horrible, and sometimes I start to wonder if it's like the actors. But no, it really is just that fucking script. That script is shit. And, this is a movie that's become very relevant in our time because some people might say because it's exploring AI. But it doesn't have anything to fucking say about AI. It's got this Pinocchio story about, like, Ares trying to become a person. And the way it explores that is just so lazy and cliche and just very, like, bad because of the dialogue and doesn't really give you a reason to care. And Jared Leto is not a charismatic actor enough to make the lines of dialogue work that another actor would deliver with a lot of more charisma and maybe make some of these terrible lines sellable. It just was kind of messy on that front. And then so and it felt like, wow, they're exploring this idea of what it means to be alive. Doesn't feel like it's properly explored in this movie. They're exploring themes about AI in our time. It didn't feel like they had anything to say about that. And that's what I say where this is a movie that's a mess. It feels like it's trying to say things, be deep, go into stuff. Never goes far enough with that. The first Tron movie actually does. The first Tron movie has lots of themes about like religious philosophy and certain ideas. And it does actually explore those movies in a pretty interesting degree. And so, what's flawed as that original film is, it is not. It's still better than this movie in some regard. I would rather watch this movie over that original Tron because the original Tron's kind of dated and kind of its own beast. But I still think that this movie is something. So I don't know. If you're a big Tron fan, I feel like it's worth watching. But I feel like if you're not a big Tron fan, you're not really going to get much out of this movie because it's just a mess of a movie, and none of the cool action is enough to really make up for what's wrong with this movie. It is a very, very flawed movie, and maybe, I want to say the most disappointing movie of the year, but this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, while having a pretty high understanding that it was not going to be good, to be honest. I just love Tron, and I was excited, and yeah, it disappointed me, but also it didn't at the same time. Very conflicting movie, but very much had a good time as a Megatron fan, and only recommend it to the die-hard Tron fans, to be honest.